Now, confirmation that 6 of the biggest clubs in the Premiership have created a new breakaway Super League with 6 other top European sides has been met with anger, it's fair to say.
The decision threatens to split English football. Even the Prime Minister has condemned the move, saying football clubs must answer to their fans. Well, joining us now is the Minister of State for Housing, Christopher Pincher. Very good morning to you, Mr Pincher. Are you a big football fan?
Well, I must admit, I haven't been to watch a match for quite some years. I think the Batty brothers and Derek Dougan were in charge of Wolves when I last went. But I'm certainly a fan of the fans and their right to have their voice heard.
What do you make of the fact that the top 6 clubs, who actually, I mean, at the moment, the top 6 in the table are not all represented in this breakaway top 6, but are they following the money? Is that something they're entitled to do? Or are they letting down their fans and making a power grab?
Well, look, the Prime Minister has been really clear overnight since this news broke that this Super League proposal is really very concerning. It could result in money being sucked out of the game, particularly the grassroots game that we need to support after a very torrid 12 months with COVID. It certainly isn't something which, if you talk to the fans, they support. It's something which players like Jamie Carragher and former players like Roy Keane are concerned about. The former FA chair, David Bernstein, has come out against it. I think there's some real concern about these proposals, and that's why overnight the Sports Secretary, Oliver Dowden, talked to his officials to look at what options there might be available for us to represent the voice and the views of those fans, because we don't want an elite footballing sport. We don't want a Super League which is of the elites, by the elites, and for the elites.
Exactly as you say, your colleague Oliver Dowden, who is effectively, you know, the sports secretary, says this looks like a closed shop. I mean, should they be kicked out of the Premier League? If they come back with a whole load of more money, doesn't that distort the domestic league?
Well, I think there is a real risk of distortion. There's a real risk of money being sucked out of the domestic league, out of grassroots sport and grassroots football in particular. And that's why we want to look at all the options that are available. We'll talk to the FA, we'll talk to UEFA to make sure that we properly represent the view and the voice and the concerns of fans and of clubs up and down this country, because this does look like a closed shop with no promotion, no relegation. It doesn't seem to be like a competition at all.
You talk about elitism, and this is an elite sport, and it supports elitists, and that's all it does, and that's not what football's about. Some people may say the same about the Conservative government and people in power at the moment, that lobbying is actually promoting elitism, because yet again we heard in the last couple of days that Matt Hancock has now got a 15% share, we learn, in a company that also managed to secure NHS contracts. And this is just one of many allegations and cases we're hearing from either recent months or years, but certainly during the time of the pandemic, and going back almost 10 years with Conservative government. That's elitism. So how can you turn around to footballers, the football owners, and call them elitist when that's what you guys operate in at the moment?
There are very clear rules about what former ministers can and can't do when they leave office. There's a firewall of at least 2 years before ministers can go into...
Hang on a moment. Adil was referring to the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, who is still in office and has shares in this company.
And there are clear rules in the ministerial code about what ministers can and can't do about the decisions that they made. And the reference that you just made to Matt Hancock and decisions made by Public Health England and the NHS, those decisions are made by officials and by administrators, not by ministers. There's a very clear firewall between ministers and decisions they take and decisions which are made.
But surely, if you're a civil servant and you're making those decisions for NHS contracts, and you see one offer that comes onto your table and it is associated with Matt Hancock, the Secretary of State for Health, ultimately your boss, whether he's said something to you or not, that is going to be quite influential. You'll be thinking, well, Am I supposed to give him the contract here? Maybe I'm looking after my own career. Maybe I ought to. And one day Matt Hancock might put me in a more senior position. This is what happens. That is elitism, isn't it? And these rules protect it. Yes, it is, because it's the same people every single time. Why is it the wealthiest politicians are now also securing these NHS contracts? And a former Prime Minister could have earned himself £60 million via Greensill. And there are many other cases. That is elitism. I can't do that. Most people in this country can't do that. And it's keeping the poor poorer and the rich richer.
The civil service doesn't work like that. It makes very careful and considered decisions with a very clear firewall between it and ministerial involvement. And there was no ministerial involvement in those decisions that you referred to. And with respect to the Greensill matter, the real story here is ministers obeyed the rules. David Cameron approached Rishi Sunak with a proposal from Greensill. Rishi Sunak responded by saying, "Thank you very much, David. That's very interesting. I'll discuss it with my officials." He did discuss it with officials. He returned and said, "I'm sorry, but we're not changing our policy." That's an example of how the system does work. Ministers behaving
but if the system works, how come you've set up 6 inquiries to investigate it?
Because I think that, like the law, the system mustn't just be done, it must be seen to be done. And so the Prime Minister has commissioned an independent inquiry. There are other parliamentary inquiries which are going to take place as well, to see whether the rules need to be adjusted. The inquiry will...
Hang on, so what you're saying is, as long as it looks like you care about it, looks like you're going to make an investigation, as we've seen time and time again, and come on, we've seen this before, and all that ever happens is a stern slap on the wrists. Nobody's ever been seriously prosecuted for this. We see it each and every time. Either we hear a stern letter was written to George Osborne, don't do that again. David Cameron, don't do that again. That's all we ever see. So, and you've just pretty much admitted, as long as you're seen to be doing the right thing, but the fact is, you believe you're working within the rules, and you believe there's no problem with the rules.
We've got really tough rules in our country, but clearly there is a story that has arisen over the last few days. The Prime Minister wants to make sure that our system works and works effectively. So it isn't just working effectively, but it's seen to be working effectively, so people can have trust and confidence in it. And that's why he's asked Nigel Boardman to undertake this inquiry. Mr Boardman will have access to all the information that he needs. He'll make recommendations to the government, as I'm sure will a number of other parliamentary inquiries, and then we can discuss and consider soberly what might need to be done. But fundamentally, on this particular issue, ministers stuck to the rules, behaved with propriety, and there was no change in policy. Okay. So the real story is ministers stuck to the rules.
Sounds like you're prejudging these inquiries by saying that, Housing Minister. But Christopher Pincher, thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning.